So we've had just about a year of Jupiter in tropical Libra. And Jupiter in tropical Libra has a few issues with it. So the good news is that October 11th, as Jupiter shifts to tropical Scorpio, we're going to see a lot better expression of Jupiter's energy within our lives. Now, let's take a moment to consider what exactly happens when Jupiter is in Libra. So this will be reflecting upon the previous year. When Jupiter is in tropical Libra, it is getting what's called starved by the planet Venus, because Venus is an enemy to Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet of happiness. Venus is a planet of worldly fulfillment. And since Jupiter typically deals with higher philosophies, happiness that is related to the bigger picture, not necessarily specific physical, mundane things. Whenever we have Jupiter starved by Venus in the sign of Libra, oftentimes what will occur is that individuals will feel like if they just had that one little thing to make life better, everything would work out great. If they just had the one relationship, if they just had their children acting in a certain way, if their career was just changed a little bit, then everything would be fantastic. And this all occurs, this thinking, this process occurs whenever we have Jupiter in a sign ruled by Venus, because that starvation occurs there. And what's the issue? What's the formula? Well, essentially, that's taking your happiness, your Jupiter, and it's subjecting it to the changing phenomena of the external world, which is Venus, fulfillment through things of the external world. And this is why these two planets happen to be not necessarily mutually supportive of each other. Venus actually hurts Jupiter. And this has been going on since fall of 2016. Now, this is not necessarily the worst kind of experience people can have. It's not like we're having Jupiter starved by Saturn, or we're not having Saturn starved by Mars, and so on. But it's two benefics, and they're causing people to seek happiness in ways in which they're not going to get it. So it creates this underlying sense of frustration towards being fulfilled. Now, that gets worse, or it would have gotten worse, whenever Venus was in a better situation. So whenever Venus would have been transiting through Taurus or Gemini or Virgo or Libra, any sign where Venus had strength due to dignity, that would make the starvation of Jupiter worse for this past year. But what's past is past, and that's done. So we can start thinking about Jupiter's transit into tropical Scorpio. Now, the great thing about transiting Jupiter in Scorpio is that now Jupiter is in the sign of a friend, which means that throughout the year, Jupiter is going to have more delight, more support from Mars, which rules over Scorpio. We're going to find that whereas previously the best dignity that Jupiter could have been in for fall of 2017 through fall of 2016 was a neutral dignity, which is considered to be a scarce dignity. It just gets by. Now we're having Jupiter in a sign where the worst dignity it's going to be in is neutral. So previously, the best dignity it could be in was neutral. Now the worst dignity it could be in is neutral. And from there, it can be in a friend sign, great friend sign, where it will be able to more fully express its innate qualities, which is actually learning how to find happiness that will be fulfilling in regards to the bigger picture. Mars rules over things like logic, fixing situations immediately, taking care of problems, making things better now. Whenever we get Jupiter in the sign of Mars, then that Mars is delighting Jupiter. And that's going to allow Jupiter for the next 12 months, from October 2017 through around October 2018, to give us the capacity to actually see how to improve situations to find happiness. Jupiter is a wonderful planet to finding greater opportunities, to seeing what will it take to create such a deep, abiding sense of happiness that is not dependent upon what's going on in the world around us. And bringing Mars into play here by ruling over Jupiter, that's going to drive that Jupiter to be very specific, very directed, and getting right to the point of the issue. So what we're going to find for the remainder of this year is that depending on where Mars is situated, so we might have to do some videos through the coming weeks and months to get a sense of when will Jupiter be better. But depending on where Mars is situated, you are going to have a better capacity to know what is actually truly going to bring you lasting, deep, abiding happiness. Jupiter is a planet of wisdom, philosophy, spirituality, so it can also show through things like taking time daily in contemplative processes to explore what would be the right path to take in any given situation. You're going to get better results. You're going to get better answers. You're going to get better responses to those kinds of contemplations. Mars ruling over Jupiter, Jupiter being in the sign of Scorpio, that's also going to show us that this year is a wonderful year for taking strides to improve our psychological health. That's because this is happening in the sign of Scorpio, which deals with our deeper psychological well-being. So learning to purge those things which are no longer useful to us. But more importantly, since Jupiter is the giver of goodness, the giver of grace, the giver of happiness, it's learning to recognize what is wholesome in our life, what will uplift us, what will bring us peace, and pull more of that into our lives. By making those kinds of decisions, that Mars will empower that Jupiter to keep those things more fully in your life. Again, we need to look at our lives as though they're like gardens. And this is the wonderful time to be weeding out those things which no longer serve you on a deeper emotional, psychological level, and planting those things which will support you, because that combination of Jupiter being the sign of Mars will allow those activities that do bring you greater happiness, do bring you a greater sense of peace, to flourish more readily. And Mars will give you the capacity to see very clearly what is working and what is not working. So again, we do need to learn to put our attention more fully into our heart, more fully into our inner being from time to time. But if we're cautious and if we're able to watch and pay attention, we can really listen, because Jupiter is the planet of listening, of hearing wisdom, of hearing good guidance. If we can start to quiet our minds to hear and pay attention to what works and what doesn't work, and we live in such a way that we prune away those things that aren't working, and again, give more attention to that which is working, we can really recreate a powerful situation in our life that will last for the next 12 years, because Jupiter, it takes 12 years for Jupiter to go through the zodiac. So this time period, October 2017 through fall of 2018, is about tending to the garden of your psychological well-being, is about learning to plant those seeds that will nourish you for the next 12 years, again, deeply, emotionally, psychologically. And since this is also falling in Scorpio, this can be a wonderful time, a wonderful year to focus on improving your intimate relationships with those that are dear to you. Now, of course, that can be sexuality, but it can simply be just being more intimate with your friends, sharing more with your friends, growing more in regards to your friends, creating that deeper bond, because it's the sign of Scorpio that shows the capacity to have a deeper bond with those that we love, those that are around us. But also, since it's Scorpio and that can deal with removing poisons, recognizing poisons, you do have to take the time to recognize those people that are more poisonous to your psychological well-being, your emotional well-being, and really start removing yourself from their influence. Loving them, blessing them, but focusing on those areas of life, those people which are more nourishing to your psychological and emotional state. And also, when we see Jupiter moving into tropical Scorpio, the wonderful thing is that in the charts that deal with the sense of purpose, the Navamsha, and also the sense of activity in the world, Jupiter is going to be exalted. So that tells us that as we go into this process, especially the first week, let's be very clear on how long that lasts. So 18th. So this will run up to the October 11th through the 23rd. This is a very ideal time to be contemplating, how do you want to change this year? How do you want to improve your sense of happiness? How do you want to be more deeply and profoundly connected to others in a wholesome way? What kinds of things do you want to accomplish that will actually bring you deeper contentment and joy? And by contemplating those things, writing them down, intending to act upon them, that will help you benefit from this initial transit of Jupiter in tropical Scorpio, where it's getting the support by being exalted in the D10 of activity, status, and fame, and also exalted in the chart that deals with deeper purpose and meaning, the Navamsha. Okay, so overall, when we think about this process of Jupiter moving into tropical Scorpio, everything being equal, this is a wonderful transit specifically for Jupiter. Considering how Jupiter is going to change through the Navamsha, the Dasamsha, considering how Mars is going to transit in relationship to Jupiter, that's going to be important. And these will have to be things for future videos. But for now, this is enough to prepare you for this fantastic transit. And also at the same time, which is helpful, when Jupiter does transit into tropical Scorpio, we're going to find that the moon will be in a trine from Jupiter, and Jupiter will be aspecting the moon. Jupiter will be aspecting the moon in Cancer, which further confirms this idea of having a greater sense of emotional fulfillment and finding those things that are causing problems and learning to weed them out for this year of October 2017 through fall of 2018.